The year was 1865, and the frontier had little use for the weak. Dust rose behind the wagon wheels like smoke from a dying fire. The team of oxen creaked to a stop at the edge of the ravine, where the earth dipped low and shadows clung like sorrow. A man jumped down from the driver's seat, wide hat, long coat, eyes too tired to care, and walked to the back. He unlatched the tailgate, reached inside, and dragged her out by the wrist. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. She couldn't. Her leg, twisted, useless since she was 5, hung limp behind her, the leather brace holding bone and pride together with rusted buckles and prayers. She hit the ground hard, face scraping gravel, and tasted blood. She blinked up at him, hoping for something, anything left in his eyes. But the man didn't even glance back. "We ain't got room for charity," he muttered, tossing her threadbare satchel after her. "You'll only slow us down." Then he climbed back onto the wagon, snapped the reins, and drove away. The dust swallowed him. The silence stayed. She lay there, chest heaving, the noon sun bearing down like a weight meant to crush the forgotten. Her name was Ella, at least that's what her mother used to call her before the fever took her. She was 15, alone, crippled, and abandoned somewhere between Fort Bridger and nowhere at all. Flies buzzed. Her lips cracked. She pulled herself upright inch by inch, her palms raw and stinging from the rocks. The ravine was wide, dry, littered with sagebrush and sorrow. There was no sign of water, no sign of hope. By sunset, she had crawled 20 yards. Her arms trembled. Her knees bled through her calico skirt. Coyotes howled in the distance. She curled beneath a scrub bush, clutching her satchel like a child with a doll, and waited for the night to do what men would not, take her quickly. But the night didn't. The next day came, crueler than the last. The sun clawed across the sky. Buzzards circled. She found a patch of dew on a rock and sucked it dry. Ate a beetle. Slept. Dreamed of her mother brushing her hair, of laughter that hadn't existed in years. She woke to rattlesnake tracks near her hand. By the third day, her skin had burned red, blistered on her cheeks and shoulders. Her voice was gone. Her breath came dry and shallow. And then she heard it, hooves. She blinked through cracked lashes. A dark shape approached from the east, backlit by the morning sun. At first, she thought it was death, come late. Then she saw the broad shoulders, the old coat flapping in the breeze, and the hat pulled low over a bearded face. A man. He dismounted without hurry, said nothing, just looked at her like he was studying a puzzle with a missing piece. His face was lean, tanned to leather, and unreadable as the book of Revelation. She opened her mouth to speak, but all that came was a croak. The man knelt, pulled a canteen from his saddlebag, held it to her lips. Cool water, real water, rushed over her tongue and down her throat like grace. She coughed, sputtered, cried a little, and tried to sit up. He didn't help her. "You alone?" he finally asked. She nodded. "Name?" She licked her lips. "Ella." He gave no reply, just stood, looked at the sky like it had answers. Then, without a word, he reached down and picked her up, carried her like she weighed nothing at all. She went limp in his arms, head against his shoulder. His shirt smelled of sweat, horse, and wood smoke. He placed her gently in the back of his buckboard wagon, covering her with a patched blanket. Then he climbed up front, flicked the reins, and turned west. Ella didn't ask where they were going. She didn't care. He hadn't left her. That was enough. The sun was low by the time they reached his land. Not much to look at, a lean farmhouse with a drooping porch, a barn barely upright, and fields of golden grass whipped by wind. A dog barked once from under the porch, then went quiet. The man lifted her again and carried her into the barn. Clean, dry straw, a cot in the corner, a bucket of water. No words, just action. He left her food, cornbread, jerky, dried apples, then returned to his house. Ella didn't sleep that night. She stared at the rafters, listening to the wind and the creak of old boards. Something in the air felt different. Not safe, not yet, but quieter, less cruel. The next morning he brought her a tin plate of eggs and sat it beside her without comment. He turned to go, then paused. "Abel," he said simply. She blinked. "What?" "My name." Then he walked out. Days passed. She healed slowly, arms scabbed, lips less cracked. She still couldn't walk, not properly, but she insisted on sitting up, washing her face, combing her hair with a carved bone comb she found in her satchel. Abel never asked where she came from, never asked what happened. He brought food, water, sometimes a book, always left before she could thank him. But one night, the quiet broke. A horse approached fast, hooves pounding like war drums. A rider skidded to a stop in front of the barn. The dog barked wildly. "You in there, Abel?" a man's voice shouted. "Drunk. Angry. Heard you took in some crippled girl from the trail. What in God's name are you thinking?" Ella froze, clutching her blanket. Footsteps thudded on the porch. Then a click, metal on metal. A rifle cocking. Abel stepped out. The rider, a red-faced brute with whiskey breath and a shotgun across his lap, pointed toward the barn. "That your new project? Town's talking, old man." Abel said nothing. "I mean, really, what good's a broken girl out here? You getting soft?" Still nothing. "Or maybe you like helpless. That it." A pause. Then Abel raised the rifle and took one slow step forward. He didn't yell, didn't threaten, just stared. The man grunted, spat, turned his horse. "You'll regret it," he called, over his shoulder. Abel lowered the gun, watched until the dust settled, then walked back inside. Ella didn't breathe until the silence returned. The next morning, she found a pair of crutches leaning against the wall beside her cot. Old, hand-carved, worn smooth at the grips. A note beside them, written in a shaky but careful hand. "You can stay, but I don't do charity, ****. She smiled for the first time in weeks. The crutches were heavy, and her first few steps were a clumsy struggle, but each one burned with stubborn pride. She wasn't dead. She wasn't gone. She wasn't useless. She had a name, a place, and a man who, though he barely spoke, had done what no one else dared. He saw her as something more than broken. By the end of the week, she made it to the barn door by herself. She watched the sun set beyond the fields, red and gold streaking the sky like war paint. The wind whispered through the wheat. Somewhere the dog barked at nothing. And Abel? He stood on the porch of the farmhouse, watching her through the dusk. Hat in hand, rifle by the door. Same silent stare. But this time he nodded. Not much, just once. But it meant everything. Ella nodded back. And for the first time since her mother died, she knew what it felt like to be seen. Ella awoke before the sun, as always. The barn was cold, the kind of cold that snuck down into your bones and made your teeth ache. She swung her legs over the side of the cot and reached for the crutches leaning against the wall, worn now, where her hands had gripped them day after day. Her arms ached from a strain, but there was pride in that ache. Honest work had left it there. The rooster crowed, the dog barked, and Abel was already in the yard, chopping wood with a rhythm that never broke. One swing, crack. Another, split. She watched him through the barn doors for a moment, a quiet silhouette against the pink morning sky. He was steady, reliable, as if nothing in the world could knock him off balance. She crutched her way out across the yard, slow but determined, until she stood at the chicken coop. The hens clucked, restless, pecking the dirt. She dropped corn into their pan, whispering to them like they were friends she'd had for years. Sometimes they listened. Sometimes they didn't. Like people. Later, she limped toward the pump, bucket in hand. The handle groaned, and water splashed into the pail with a sound so clean it made her forget the silence of the trail. She wiped sweat from her brow and straightened. Abel stood nearby, wiping his axe clean. "You don't need to do all that," he said. "I ain't doing it for you," she answered. "I'm doing it for me." He gave a slight nod, approval buried deep in that weathered face. That was the most they said to each other all day, but something passed between them stronger than words. Respect, maybe, or understanding. Days turned into weeks. Ella grew stronger. Her limp didn't vanish, but she moved faster now, steadier. She learned how to milk goats, how to bake bread without burning it, and how to shoot a rattlesnake from 10 yards out. Abel taught her the last one, hands careful but firm on her shoulders as he guided her aim. She missed the first 3 shots, The fourth struck the can clean off the fence post. She grinned. He almost did, too. In the evenings, she'd sit outside the barn and read from the tattered Bible he'd left on her cot. Sometimes aloud, sometimes to herself. Once, she looked up and saw him sitting on the porch, eyes closed, just listening. But nothing good on the frontier stayed quiet for long. One morning, she found feathers strewn across the yard. Blood on the dirt. The henhouse door had been ripped off the hinges. Something had gotten in. Abel knelt by the tracks, fingers brushing the disturbed earth. "Coyote?" she asked. "Too clean." This was a man. Her chest tightened. They followed the trail to the fence line where a crude mark had been carved into the wood, an X, deep and angry. Ella stared at it, stomach churning. "That's a message, isn't it?" she asked. Abel stood. "Yep." "From who?" He didn't answer. That night, she bolted upright in her cot to the sound of voices outside. Angry. Slurred. Glass shattered against the side of the barn. Laughter followed. She hobbled to the door, heart pounding. Abel was already outside, shotgun slung low across his chest. 3 men stood at the edge of the yard, faces half hidden in the dark. One of them stepped forward. She recognized him. The same man from weeks ago, the drunk, red-faced rider with the shotgun. "We warned you, Abel," he shouted. "Told you not to take in trash." Ella's hands clenched on her crutches. Abel didn't raise his voice. "You step 1 foot past that fence, and I won't waste breath asking again." The man spat. "She's a blight. She's trouble. She's not fit for this land, and you know it." "I reckon I know more than you think." The man scoffed. "You're gonna regret keeping her." Abel raised the shotgun. "And you'll regret staying." The drunk turned, muttering to the others. They disappeared into the dark, but Ella knew it wasn't over. The next morning, Abel found her packing her things. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I can't stay. I'm bringing trouble to your land. You said no charity." He frowned. "You think I saved you for charity?" "You saved me because you're good," she said. "But I don't want to be a burden. Not again." He stepped closer, voice low but firm. "You work harder than most men I've known. You cook, clean, feed my animals, run the farm when I'm gone. That's not charity. That's partnership." Her heart beat faster. "Then why do they hate me so much?" she whispered. He looked away. "Because folks out here fear what they don't understand. You lived. That shames them." She said nothing. "Ella," he said slowly, "this land, it ain't just mine anymore. Not really. You've earned your place here." She tried to hold back the tears, but failed. They burned down her cheeks like oil on fire. "Still," he said, "there's talk in town. They're saying it ain't proper, us living under one roof, even if it's just you in the barn. Some folks are pushing the sheriff to act." Ella wiped her eyes. "So I have to leave." "No," he said. She looked up. "I'm offering you marriage." Her breath caught. "What?" "It ain't about love. Not now, anyhow. It's about protection. If you're my wife, no one can say you don't belong." She stepped back, uncertain. "I'm just a crippled girl from the trail." "You're more than that," he said. "You're the toughest soul I've ever known." She studied his face. There was no pity in his eyes. No hunger either. Just sincerity. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small band of iron. Worn. Simple. It was my mother's. Her fingers shook as he placed it in her palm. "I don't expect anything from you," he said. "Just stay, with a name and a place that can't be taken." The next day, under a cottonwood tree behind the barn, they said their vows. No preacher, no guests, just the wind and the land and the soft creak of her crutches in the grass. She wore a dress she'd patched herself. He wore his cleanest shirt. She said her vow in a whisper. He said his with a nod. He slid the iron ring on her finger. And that was that. In the days that followed, she moved from the barn to the house. Not out of want, but necessity. If she was going to share a name, she'd share the burden too. She scrubbed floors, washed clothes, learned to saddle a mule and shoot a hawk mid-flight. She even learned to laugh again, low and rare, but real. Abel began leaving lists for her on the kitchen table. Asterisk milk cow. Check the fence by the creek. Boil soap. Asterisk, she answered with notes of her own. Asterisk, done. Found a cracked post. Soup's on the stove. Asterisk. At night, they sat on the porch, neither speaking much, but the silence felt full now, not empty. One night, while mending a shirt by the fire, she asked, "Do you ever regret it?" He looked up from his whittling. "What?" "Marrying me." He set the wood down. "Only that I didn't find you sooner," he said. She didn't reply, just smiled softly, eyes back on her needle. But in the shadows of that peace, danger still lingered. Word had reached town that the girl, who couldn't walk now, ran a farm with more grit than half the men. Some folks respected that. Others didn't. One afternoon, riding back from the creek, Abel found a rabbit nailed to the gate. Its throat slit, blood dripping onto the dirt. Ella buried it without flinching. "They want to scare us," she said. "They won't," he answered. She leaned on her crutches, wind tugging at her hair. "Maybe it's time we scared them back." Abel raised a brow. "You said I earned my place here," she said. "Well, let's make damn sure no one forgets it." That night, she took Abel's old rifle, cleaned it herself, and loaded it with fresh rounds. The wind howled outside like a warning, but she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Let them come. She was a wife now. And this was her land, too. The sky was a smoky orange, lit from behind by a low sun and the haze of dust blowing in from the west. Ella stood at the fence line, her crutches digging into the hard-packed earth, eyes scanning the horizon. She didn't flinch at the wind or the ache in her arms anymore. This land had toughened her. What once felt like a burden now felt like armor. Behind her, the farmhouse cast a long, slanted shadow across the yard. Abel was in the barn, tending to the mule, with quiet hands and a furrowed brow. He'd been restless since they found the rabbit nailed to the gate a week ago. Too quiet, even for him. Each sunrise brought a question in his eyes. He didn't speak aloud. When are they coming? Ella felt it too. That breathless calm before a storm, the kind you could feel in your teeth. They didn't have to wait long. It started with a flicker. Ella saw it first, a tiny tongue of flame licking up from the far side of the barn. At first, it was so small she thought her eyes were playing tricks. Then it jumped, fast and high, catching the dry hay and racing toward the rafters. "Abel," she screamed. He was already running. The barn lit up like kindling, flames leaping through the slats, smoke pouring into the air. Chickens scattered, wings flapping wild. The mule kicked against its pen. Somewhere in the haze, glass shattered. Abel burst through the barn doors, hauling open the stall. The mule galloped free into the night, eyes wide with fear. He turned just in time to see 3 figures on horseback ride over the ridge, torches in hand, shouting like madmen. "Get her inside," he yelled. But Ella didn't move. She grabbed the rifle. Her hands didn't shake. Her aim didn't waver. One of the riders threw a bottle, glass wrapped in fire. It smashed near the water trough, flames erupting in a sudden whoosh. Ella raised the rifle, squinted, and fired. The shot cracked through the yard like lightning. One rider reeled back, clutching his shoulder, then tumbled from the saddle. His horse bolted into the dark. "Ella, now!" Abel shouted. "I am inside," she snapped, leveling the rifle again. Another man dismounted, running low behind the fence, revolver drawn. Abel moved to intercept him, shotgun in hand. The 2 men collided near the porch, struggling in the dirt. The gun fired once, but the shot missed, splintering the porch rail. Ella couldn't get a clean shot. She limped forward, dragging the crutch in one hand, gripping the rifle in the other. Her lungs burned from smoke. Her eyes watered, but her heartbeat stayed steady. She knelt just enough to brace the stock. Breathe in. Aim. Breathe out. She fired. The attacker's leg crumpled under him. He screamed, dropping the revolver. Abel rose from the ground, panting, and slammed the butt of his shotgun into the man's head. The last rider hesitated at the fence line, torch held high. His face, red and round, was familiar. The same man who'd mocked her, threatened her, warned them to send her away. "You've gone and lost your mind, Abel," he bellowed, eyes wild. "You're fighting your own kind over a half-broken stray." "She's more woman than you'll ever be man," Abel growled. The rider threw his torch toward a house. Ella didn't let it land. Her third shot rang out. The torch dropped midair and smacked the dirt, extinguished in a puff of dust. The man stared at her, stunned. Ella chambered another round, slow and deliberate. "Run," she said. He did. The silence afterward was thicker than smoke. Flames still crackled from the barn, but the worst had passed. Abel and Ella worked together to douse what they could, hauling bucket after bucket from the trough, soaking cloths, and slapping at embers. By midnight, only blackened timbers remained. They sat on the porch together, breathing hard. Her dress was soaked with sweat and ash. His hands were raw and blistered. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then Abel said, "You were something else tonight." She looked at him, face streaked with soot. "I was your wife." He gave a slow nod. "You were." In the weeks that followed, word spread. At first, whispers. Then stories. They said she took down 2 grown men with a rifle and grit. That she fought like a frontier widow with nothing left to lose. That the girl, who once couldn't walk, now defended her land better than most men defended their pride. The sheriff came by once, asking questions with careful phrasing. Abel answered them all. Ella stood beside him the whole time, never wavering. No charges were filed. Later that week, the women in town began dropping by with fresh eggs and pie. One even brought a pair of boots she said might fit Ella's good foot. None mentioned the attack. They didn't have to. Respect, once withheld, now filled the space where scorn had lived. Ella worked harder than ever. The barn had to be rebuilt. Chickens replaced. Fencing mended. She painted the front door herself, leaning on one crutch with a bucket of whitewash at her feet. Abel built her a new saddle, one that fit the sway of her hips and the crooked twist of her leg. They didn't speak much of the night of the fire. It lived between them in glances, in the touch of a hand over breakfast, in the creak of the porch swing when they sat side by side. One cool morning in early spring, Abel brought her a folded paper. "What's this?" she asked. "Deed transfer. Half the land's in your name now." She blinked at him. "You don't have to." "I know," he said. "I want to." She signed it with a careful hand. Later that night, they danced. No music, no audience. Just him and her in the dirt yard, fireflies blinking above them, her arms around his neck and his steady hands at her waist. She leaned on him, crutches forgotten, cheek against his chest. He didn't move fast, didn't lead with showy steps. Just a slow sway, side to side, boots scuffing the earth. She laughed quietly. "I must look a sight." "You look like mine," he said. She pulled back, searching his face. "Do you love me, Abel?" He didn't smile, not quite, but something softer moved across his eyes. "I reckon I do." She pressed her forehead to his, heart aching in the best way. "I reckon I love you, too." The next morning, the sun rose pink and gold over the hills. The fields were thick with new grass, and the wind blew clean across the porch. Ella stood at the edge of the yard, looking out over the land. Her land, a land she'd crawled across once, thinking it might be her grave. Now it was her home. She turned to find Abel behind her, steaming mugs in hand. He offered her one. "You thinking about the past?" he asked. "I'm thinking about how I never thought I'd make it this far. You made it further than most." She sipped her coffee. The taste was bitter, hot, real. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. "Regret what?" "Giving me your name. Your land." He took a long breath, eyes on the horizon. "Only that I didn't find you sooner," he said. They stood together, side by side, as the sun climbed higher. And if you ask anyone in that part of the territory, anyone who remembers the fire or the barn dance that followed, or the girl who once limped down Main Street with ash in her hair and a rifle on her back, they'll tell you the same thing. They'll tell you about Ella McCrae. They'll tell you how she wasn't broken. She was just waiting for the kind of place and the kind of man who saw her not as something to fix, but as something worth building with. And maybe, in the end, that's what the West was really about. Not just survival, but the kind of love that grows in hard ground. The kind that fights back. The kind that stays. The rain came hard that spring, hard enough to turn roads into rivers and wash fence lines clear out of the ground. Ella stood barefoot on the porch, hem of her dress dark with mud, crutch tucked under one arm as she watched the storm roll over the plains like a punishment. The sky cracked open with light, thunder chasing close behind. But she didn't flinch. She'd learned by now that storms come and go. It was the people that stayed behind afterward you had to worry about. Inside, Abel set a kettle on the stove, movement slower than usual. He'd been favoring his right side since the night of the fire, a rib still not quite right. He wouldn't say it hurt, but she saw the wince in his shoulders when he lifted anything heavier than a coffee cup. She turned to him. That fence on the north end, if the posts go any looser, the cattle will find their way to Wyoming. I'll ride out tomorrow, he said, soon as the ground firms. You won't. I will, she replied. He gave her that look, half amusement, half warning, but didn't argue. They both knew she wasn't asking. The next morning broke blue and clean, the world washed bright by the storm. Ella saddled her mule and rode out alone, rifle strapped across her back, satchel at her hip. The land smelled of wet earth and promise. But as she approached the north ridge, she saw the fence wasn't just down, it was gone. Posts scattered, wire pulled clean as if someone had meant to rip it out. She slid off the saddle, crouched low. Boot prints. Not hers. Not Abel's. Too many to be a mistake. Trouble wasn't gone. It had just gone quiet for a while. When she returned that evening, her face was set hard, jaw tight. Abel met her in the yard. What did you see? Sabotage. Organized. They're still coming, Abel. He rubbed his jaw. You think it's that same pack from before? No, I think it's worse. She paused, then added, I think someone's paying them. Abel's eyes narrowed. Why? Ella exhaled slow. Because we made em look weak. And they didn't like that. That night, they stayed up by the fire, plans spreading across the table like a war map. Abel cleaned the rifles. Ella marked every weak point on the property, the blind spots, the creek crossings, the gaps between trees. She moved with purpose, as sharp and steady as any soldier. Abel watched her like he was seeing something he'd known was there, but never truly grasped. You ever think, he asked, about what it'd be like if you'd never been left? She looked up. Every day. But then I remind myself I wouldn't be here. Wouldn't be me. He nodded. You ain't who I saved anymore. You're the one Savon now. She didn't answer, just loaded another round. By the next week, the tension had stretched thin as wire across dry posts. The town was quiet, too quiet. Even the men at the feed store had stopped talking when Ella walked in. She felt it on her skin, eyes behind doors, hands on guns, breath held in every shadow. Then came the letter. Abel found it nailed to the fence post, crudely scrawled on parchment. Leave by Sunday or burn again. We don't miss twice, asterisk, asterisk. Ella read it, jaw clenching. Looks like they think we scare easy. Abel touched her wrist. We should leave. She stared at him. Asterisk we asterisk should? I've seen enough war to know when it's worth dying for. And this ain't. He looked at her then, not like a farmer. Like a soldier remembering something he'd tried to forget. I'd die for you, Ella, he said. But I won't let you die for land. She stepped back. I ain't dying for land. I'm standing for the only place that ever made me more than a burden. And if you walk away from that now, what did we build it for? Silence stretched between them. Finally, Abel nodded. All right then. They prepared like people who understood what was coming. Reinforced windows. Dug trenches behind the barn. Poured oil in the dirt near the main gate. Loaded every firearm in the house, every cartridge clean and ready. She kept her hair braided tight and her sleeves rolled. He moved slower than before, but his hands were still sure, his aim still deadly. The final night before Sunday came heavy with heat. The stars blinked between clouds like wary eyes. The dog growled once, then went still. Ella didn't sleep. She sat by the window, rifle across her lap, eyes on the ridge. At dawn they came. 6 of them. Faces hidden by scarves, wide brim hats pulled low. 2 on foot, 4 on horseback. The lead rider was tall, scarred, and carried a double barrel across his saddle. The others spread out, circling like wolves. Abel stepped out onto the porch, shotgun in hand. I reckon this is your warning shot, he said. The scarred man laughed. You think you're going to win this with a wife and a crutch? Ella stepped beside him. Funny, that's how we won last time. They moved fast. The first shot rang out from the treeline, meant to distract. Ella ducked, rolled behind the trough. Abel returned fire, dropped a man behind a bush. Another attacker lit a torch, rushed the barn. Ella fired once, caught him in the thigh. He screamed, fell into the mud. They were closing in now, faster, meaner. Ella darted behind a wagon, heart pounding in rhythm with the gunshots. A bullet whizzed past her ear. She turned, fired on instinct, saw a rider tumble from his horse. Smoke filled the yard. Fire crept up the grass line. Abel fought off too, with a broken pitchfork, his shotgun empty. Blood streaked his temple, but he didn't slow. Ella limped toward the house, trying to draw their fire, when a figure lunged from behind, grabbing her rifle, slamming her to the ground. Her crutch flew out of reach. Pain flared in her ribs. The man snarled above her, teeth yellow, breath sour with whiskey. Should have died on the trail, he hissed. She reached for her boot knife. Missed. He raised his fist. Then a crack, a clean, sharp sound. Abel stood over her, revolver still smoking. The man crumpled. Abel dropped beside her, pulled her close. You all right? She winced. Just need to breathe. The last of the attackers broke, running for the hills. One fell. The others vanished into the trees. Silence. Only the wind, the crackle of dying flames, and the ragged sound of their breath. Ella sat up, hand on her ribs, eyes sweeping the yard. Bodies, blood, but no more enemies. They'd won. Again. Abel helped her to the porch. She sat on the top step, head against his knee, eyes closing for just a moment. You're bleeding, she said. So are you. I'm not scared anymore, she whispered. I know, he said. They buried the dead at the edge of the field, marked only with small stones. By evening, the sun had returned, low and golden. The farmhouse still stood. The barn was scorched, but standing. Townfolk came the next day. Not to fight, to help. They brought nails, lumber, cloth for bandages. No one asked questions. No one gave speeches. But something had changed. Respect wasn't whispered now. It stood proud and tall. The sheriff came last, removing his hat. I think they know not to come back. Ella nodded. They better. This land bites back. Weeks passed. The scars faded. The fences stood strong. And one morning, as the wind carried the smell of fresh hay and honeysuckle, Ella stood beside Abel in the field and saw the first wildflowers blooming where fire once scorched the earth. She reached for his hand. I'm not who I was, she said. He squeezed her fingers. None of us are. And they stood there, quiet in the sun, knowing that while battles might come again, they'd face them side by side. Together. Always.